you another video, and today I thought it was time to kind of take a step back and talk about what the hell is going on with Sony. Yeah, the one thing I will say before I begin today is that I don't mean for this video to become very clickbaity. I don't mean for this video to spark up a console war hatred or anything like that, but there's just been a lot of very bad things involving Sony coming out in the last week and a half that need to be discussed, need to be challenged, I think, in a way that we just we're starting to. So the biggest part of this is Sony's handling of independent developers and some of the indie games that have come out. There was a massive thread on Twitter from, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to remember the person's name or the company that he represents, but basically it boils down to this developer came out and threw Sony royally under the bus and just said like, hey, working with this platform sucks. My game is not selling at all compared to the other platforms, which, you know, you look at Nintendo, you look at Microsoft, and apparently, and I didn't know this because if I'm being honest, I haven't been paying attention to how independent games are selling versus, you know, big, huge titles. So I haven't been paying attention to this. And apparently, for a lot of independent games on Sony, it's actually the worst performing platform for those titles, which is insane to me. You look at the PlayStation 4 install base, it's, you know, 100 million plus. It's easily the platform that most people own. Second would be the Nintendo Switch, and then Xbox. You know, and then, I mean, I'm not counting new gen systems because a lot of people still can't get those as of July 2021 when I'm making this video. So it was, for me, it was really eye-opening because I've never really paid that much attention to how independent games sell. So to see a graph, to see a picture, a representation of like, hey, this is how my game does on Switch, this is how my game's done on Xbox, and then this very small sliver that is Sony was incredibly eye-opening to me. And a lot of other independent developers jumped on this thread and just kind of reiterated the same thing as this one developer. And it's clear that Sony is making a lot of very almost predatory behind-the-scenes decisions and business dealings with independent developers on their game. On their games, they're taking like what I would call the Apple 30% cut, which is really high, and then on top of that, they're not advertising the games very well. So like, you know, unless you're somebody that's really in the know, if you go on the Sony store, I mean, it's a freaking mess. And I would say all the stores are to a degree a mess. Like, if you're an independent developer and you put out your new game, it's going to be buried, especially if you plant your flag and say, hey, my game's coming out on this day, and then, gee, shit, I don't know, that day, let's just say, and I'm just throwing out an example there, let's say the next big, you know, huge Call of Duty comes out, or something like that. What's going to get more traction on the store? That new Call of Duty game, or Joe Schmo's independent game? You know what I mean? So, it's really alarming. And not something I've really, you know, even thought about until looking at this. And it's very clear that there's some major things on Sony's end that needs to change with this. But I decided I wanted to take an even deeper look at it because, and this is kind of what I've predicted, we've seen this pattern repeat almost every console generation since like the PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2 era. So it seems like every era, one of these companies shoots themselves in the foot out of the gate, or relatively, you know, close after being out of the gate with a system launch. Obviously, and most famously, we look back to the Xbox 360 PS3 era when Sony was just incredibly tone deaf because they were so cocky over the PS2, and rightfully so. They should have been cocky. That system, to this day, is still, I think, the most successful system of all time. I'd have to check the numbers, but I'm pretty sure the PS2 is still the most successful home console, at least in North America, if not the world, of all time. So, like, I want to say the install base was close to 200 million. It was something absurd. I'd have to look. But They were incredibly cocky, and they had every right to be cocky. And so because of this, we jump into the PlayStation 3 generation, and now all of a sudden, you know, they come out and they're like, hey, our system's $600, which even by today's standards, $600 is an insane price tag. A lot of people think $500 for these systems is an insane price tag, which is why you see something like the Xbox Series S exists as a lower end model, where you see a digital only version of a console to try and bring that cost down. You know, Sony, they shot themselves in the foot in the Xbox 360 generation just by launching a year after the 360. The 360 already gained traction with being out an entire year before the PS3, and then you have the whole cell processor fiasco, and just games for the most part ran better on the Xbox 360. It was a phenomenal machine. The Xbox 360, one of my favorite machines of all time. Like, incredible. That's not this video. And then, even more famously, we jump to the next generation, the Xbox One and PS4 generation, where this turn, it was Microsoft was so incredibly tone deaf and cocky after the 360 generation, and they came out, they looked at the trends, they looked at how their system was tracking, and they said, oh, like, everybody wants an entertainment machine, everybody wants this thing to play Netflix, and they had two really tone-deaf press conferences that did not do them any favors. They had all sorts of, and this is, you know, in 2013, so this doesn't really play today, almost 10 years later, because now everything is connected to the internet. But in 2013, the idea of telling the average gamer, hey, your machine has to be online or it's not going to work, doesn't work, like literally doesn't work. And so telling people that, and telling people that used games might not work anymore, and things like that just was not good. And so you had that side of it, and then on the flip side, you had Sony coming out and saying, here's how you play a used game, and just having somebody pass a game box to somebody else. I mean, they really just nailed it in terms of being in the right place at the right time with that system. They came out $100 cheaper. They didn't require you to have a Kinect, and they killed it that generation because of that. Microsoft spent the entire last console generation basically arming themselves for this one that we're in now, because they flip ship. They brought Phil Spencer in from just being the head of game development to being the head of Xbox, which, if I'm being personally honest, to this day is the smartest decision Microsoft has ever made regarding the Xbox brand. This is a guy who has taken a ship that was sinking, patched it up, pulled it back up to the surface, turned it around, and has put it on the right track, and has spent the last, 7, 8, 9 years basically building things for this generation. That's why you saw all these studio acquisitions. That's why you saw, things like in early days of the Kinect being, uncoupled from the system, because if we're being honest, the system didn't need the Kinect. Microsoft forgot at the beginning of that generation that primarily these are game machines. People want to play games on them. They don't want to sit and watch Netflix on it all day, every day. If they wanted, if your average consumer wants to do that, they'll go out and buy a Roku or something, or most TVs today have that technology built in, so you don't even need to buy a Roku or a Chromecast or whatever. Each generation, when we look at them, has been this same push and pull of like, one person, one side is so incredibly cocky because how well they did last generation. They make all sorts of bad business decisions, or bad business decisions in the past that were more overlooked or ignored are now brought to the surface because people are unhappy. And that's what you're seeing with Sony this generation. You look at Microsoft, they are off of the heels of their best E3. I think in the last video I said is one of their best. I think now that I've revisited it, it is their best E3 press conference since 2006 when they announced Halo 3, and that's just because I'm a Halo fanboy. But it really was like all their studio acquisitions are paying off. You're seeing these games. You're starting to see the fruits of many years of Phil Spencer's labors come into fruition here, so to speak. And because of that, Sony is in a bad place right now. Yes, you can make the argument like, well, they're gonna have some games come out. They're the only ones that had exclusive games. Like, I'm sorry, but Ratchet and Clank doesn't appeal to everybody. I'm one of those people. I look at Ratchet and Clank and go, I don't care. Returnal didn't set the world on fire, and I bought that game. at $70, mind you. And as much as I like Eternal, as much as I think it's a really cool idea, it's not for everybody, and it was a huge gamble that I don't think personally paid off for Sony or the brand. But apparently they do, because they just bought Housemarque as a company. And the other big elephant in the room for Sony, which they still have yet to address, and it's an elephant that's only getting bigger and bigger and bigger, is Xbox Game Pass. Game Pass is the best offering in video games today. And I say this time and time again on my channel, and I'm not saying this because Microsoft is paying me to do that. I don't make any money off of YouTube. I do this for fun. It's the best value in gaming. There's so many games I played in the last year and a half, 2 years, however long Game Pass has been around, that I probably would not have played if I didn't have a service like Game Pass. Or I might not, like, I'll give, best example I'll give, State of Decay 2. So State of Decay 1, I loved when it came out, played a lot of it, even if you look back into today, it's a 360 game, didn't play very well. It actually is, like, really almost unplayable by today's standards on the 360. Terrible frame rates, just so many bugs and glitches. And so I was excited about State of Decay 2 when it launched back in 2018, because I was excited to see this game brought to the next generation on a much more powerful machine. And it launched with the worst implementation of motion blur I have ever seen in my life. So bad that it immediately gave me a headache. I've never had that kind of experience with a game ever. I turned it off. I didn't play it for like a year. If this was a game that I had gone out and paid 30, 40, 50, 60 bucks for, I would have immediately went back to the store, returned it, traded it in, whatever, never touched it again. And so, you know, a year and a half goes by, whenever a year and a half, let's see, 2018, 2 years goes by, you know, we launch the Xbox Series X, and I decide, you know what, I'm going to download, they made a Series X upgrade version of State of Decay 2, I'm going to try it out, see what the updates are. This is a game now that I've sunk over 300 hours into. One of my favorite games of this last generation, easily. A game that I played a lot of co-op with a buddy. This is a game, and this is the point I'm trying to make. Long-winded point, but if Game Pass didn't exist, I would have never given that game a second chance. I never even would have thought to look back at it and go, oh, maybe I'll try that now. Like, no. I would have never given that game money a second time. I would never have touched it again because of Game Pass. And the flip side of that too is, like, there's so many games that come out for Game Pass that, like, I would never even think of playing. And then, you know, they come to Game Pass and go, okay, I'll try it. Most recent example I can give is this Dungeons & Dragons Dark Alliance game, which is truly dreadful. And it's really awful. Especially if you're a fan of the old games. This one sucks ass. And if I had gone out and paid, you know, 40 bucks, I think they charge 40 for it. If I had gone out and paid 40 bucks for that game, popped it into my system and played it, I would have been pissed off. I would have returned it. I would never touch it again. On Game Pass, I played it for a half hour. I said, man, this really sucks. I deleted it. I didn't spend any extra money on that. It was just part of that subscription. And that's the point I'm trying to make. Sony right now doesn't have an answer to that. And I know before I even continue here, I can already see comments being typed, well, Sony has, you know, PlayStation Now. PlayStation Now is a very bad service. It is a streaming service that, like, look, now, personally, me, I'm on a gigabit internet connection. It's awesome. I still wouldn't trust a service like PlayStation Now. So, even on that connection, I don't want to stream games. I want to play them natively. So, Game Pass, you know, being able to download the game and then whatever, like, all of that works, and it works wonderfully well. Sony needs an answer to that. And I don't know if that answer is, you know, upgrading PlayStation Now to be able to, any game can be downloaded at any time. If you look at it, and they have such, like, if you look at the grand scope of PlayStation Now, and you look at the old games that you can play on it right now, and even if you were to just add a vast library of past PS1, PS2, even PS3 games that could be playable on PS4 and PS5, through a subscription service like that, even if you were to charge $15, $20 for that and had all those classic games, they would have a real answer to Game Pass. But for whatever reason, it just seems like they don't even want to compete in the same space. They're so focused on, we need this next gen, exclusive title to come out and sell a bajillion copies instead. They're very much in the old train of thought when it comes to those kind of things that Microsoft has very smartly started to get away from. One of the coolest things this fall is, like, I'm a massive Halo fan, as you guys know on the channel. Halo, like, if the tier of video game franchise for me goes Resident Evil, Halo's like right underneath it for me, and then maybe like Mario or something. But Halo Infinite, probably my most anticipated game of the year. I really hope that it doesn't suck. I'm constantly crossing my fingers and hoping that it's not a bad game. I would normally go out and buy the collector's edition. Look, I'm somebody who went out and bought the $250 collector's edition of Halo 5 at launch. I'm somebody who went out and bought the frickin' at the time, $400 Halo 4 limited edition 360 that's currently sitting upstairs in my guest bedroom because I don't have a place to put that box right now because we're still moving in and getting settled. I love Halo to death. The fact that I don't have to pay for that, I can just play it on Game Pass, is awesome. Because of any game this year, it's the one I would totally go out and pay that money for. And I don't have to. I just get it day one. And so, again, wouldn't that be awesome if Sony did the same thing? What if you could play... I'm just spitballing here and throwing out games. What if you could play the next God of War day one on a subscription service like that for PlayStation platforms? What if you could play Horizon Forbidden West day one subscription platform like that, instead of going out and spending $70 a pop for these games? How awesome would that be? It's just, I see it constantly. I keep looking back and forth and keep going what is going on with Sony right now? And I just see them getting worse and worse this generation. Again, time will tell. I own both systems, and I've been very open and honest on this channel. When I first got the systems, I ended up liking the PlayStation more at launch. It had more to offer. That honeymoon period was short-lived until I started to realize, like, hey, no, Microsoft's actually making some really smart decisions here between backwards compatibility, or I like to call it forward compatibility because that's basically what it is. The way things work between smart delivery, which it just sounds like the most asinine thing, like smart delivery, but here we are, and it works great. So, just looking at everything, when you look at all the pieces of the last 8 years of Microsoft building to this moment, this is that moment. And I wouldn't be surprised if we get to 2023, 2024, 2025, and at least in North America, you see Microsoft on top this time because of what's happening. So I just have to pose the question, I just have to ask, what's going on with Sony right now? Like, do they not care? I mean, where's their big press conference? Where's their big reveal of, a slew of games? Like, where's more footage of God of War? The only thing we've really gotten this year is a lot of footage of Horizon with the promise of maybe it'll be out at the end of this year, which I'm still maintaining March 2022 for that game. But yeah, where are your games? They have nothing for this fall announced right now that's a big title. Is that going to change? Are they going to have a conference? Or are we just kind of swinging in the air here? I don't know. So I'd love to know in the comments below, like, how do you feel about Sony right now? Like, are you, first of all, are you an owner of either of these platforms? Are you like me and you own both? I've always owned everything because I've always liked everything. But even with liking everything, I always gravitate towards one system over everything else to play, like, multi-platform games on. And the last generation and this generation, it's basically been Xbox for me, but even more so this time because of smart delivery, because of the decisions they're making. So I'd like to know in the comments below, like, how do you feel about Sony right now? Maybe you're somebody out there who hasn't bought a PlayStation 5 yet because you can't find one. Or if you do have one, are you enjoying it? Or do you not like it at all? Or do you have an Xbox? Do you have both? I'd love to know. So remember, as always, to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And until next time.